Captain Jake Morrison stared out at the massive alien structure floating in the darkness of space. The dying red star behind it cast strange shadows across its metallic surface. After 18 months of traveling through the void between stars, his crew had finally found something that proved they were not alone in the universe. The ship, New Horizon, hummed quietly around him as his team prepared for what would be humanity's first contact with alien technology. Jake had been chosen to lead this mission because of his calm nature and quick thinking. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. "Captain, we're getting some readings from the station," said Lisa Parker from her position at the engineering console. Her fingers danced across the controls as she gathered data. "It looks like there might still be power in some sections." Dr. Ben Carter looked up from his medical equipment. "If there's power, there might be life support systems still working. We could have survivors over there." Amy Rodriguez adjusted her communications headset and shook her head. "I'm not picking up any radio signals or distress calls. If anyone is alive over there, they're being very quiet about it." Jake studied the alien station through the main viewing screen. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. The structure twisted and curved in ways that seemed to follow no earthly logic. Strange symbols covered its hull, glowing faintly in the starlight. Some sections appeared damaged, with dark scorch marks and twisted metal. "How big is that thing?" Jake asked. "About 3 times the size of our largest space stations back home," Lisa replied. "But it's hard to tell what's functional and what's just debris." Jake made his decision. "We're going over. Lisa, Amy, Ben, you're with me. We'll take the shuttle and dock with what looks like their main airlock." The 4 crew members suited up in their white spacesuits and climbed into the small shuttle. As they approached the alien station, Jake felt his heart beating faster. Every human child had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was happening, the reality felt overwhelming. The alien airlock was larger than expected, easily big enough for their shuttle. Strange mechanisms moved along the walls as they docked, as if the station's systems were still trying to function despite years of abandonment. "Air pressure is stable on the other side," Ben reported, checking his instruments. "Temperature is cold but survivable. Whatever atmosphere they breathed, it's similar enough to ours." They opened the shuttle door and stepped into the alien station. Emergency lighting flickered along the corridors, casting everything in a dim red glow. The walls were smooth and curved, with no sharp corners anywhere. Everything felt organic, as if the station had been grown rather than built. "This place gives me the creeps," Amy whispered into her radio. Jake led them deeper into the station. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the empty halls. Alien writing covered the walls, but none of them could make sense of the symbols. They passed rooms filled with strange equipment and furniture that seemed designed for beings taller than humans. "Wait," Ben said suddenly, holding up his hand. "I'm detecting a life sign. Very faint, but it's there." They followed Ben's scanner through a series of winding corridors until they reached what appeared to be a medical facility. Alien devices lined the walls, some still blinking with activity. In the center of the room stood a bed-like structure, and on it lay a figure that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. She was clearly not human, but the similarities were striking. Her skin had a silver color that seemed to shine with its own light. Strange markings covered her arms and face, glowing softly in patterns that reminded Jake of constellations. She was tall and thin, with long limbs and delicate features. Her eyes were closed, and she appeared to be unconscious. "Is she alive?" Jake asked quietly. Ben approached carefully with his medical scanner. "Yes, but barely. Her vital signs are very weak. She's severely malnourished and dehydrated." As Ben spoke, the alien woman's eyes fluttered open. They were large and dark, like pools of deep water. When she saw Jake and his team standing around her, something extraordinary happened. Tears began flowing down her silver cheeks, and she made sounds that their universal translator couldn't interpret. She tried to sit up, reaching toward Jake with trembling hands. Her movements were weak but urgent, as if seeing him was the most important thing in the world. The sounds she made grew more intense, almost like crying, but mixed with what might have been words. "Easy there," Ben said gently, moving to support her. "We're here to help." But the alien woman only had eyes for Jake. She stared at him with an expression of wonder and sadness that was somehow familiar, despite her alien features. When she finally managed to touch his face through his helmet's visor, more tears flowed. Amy was frantically working on her translator device. "I'm getting fragments," she said. "Something about waiting and gods and prophecy." The translation matrix is struggling with her language. The alien woman spoke again, her voice stronger now. This time the translator caught a few words, "finally," and returned, and something that might have been creator. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Creator? Ben was running his medical equipment over the alien woman, checking her condition. "She's stable for now, but she needs food and water. Whatever happened here, she's been alone for a long time." The alien woman continued to stare at Jake, occasionally reaching out to touch his suit as if to make sure he was real. Her tears had not stopped, and Jake found himself deeply moved by her obvious emotion. "We need to get her back to the ship," he decided. "Ben, can she be moved safely?" "I think so, as long as we're careful. She's weak, but not critically injured." As they prepared to transport her, the alien woman spoke again. This time, she seemed to be trying to communicate something important. She pointed to herself and said what sounded like Zara, then pointed to Jake and said something the translator rendered as "promised one." Jake looked at his team. "I think she just told us her name is Zara." Amy nodded. "And I think she's been waiting for us. The question is, why did she cry when she saw you, Captain?" As they carefully moved Zara to their shuttle, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into something much bigger than a simple rescue mission. The way she looked at him, the tears, the words about creators and prophecies, all pointed to a mystery that would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. The alien station grew smaller behind them as they returned to the new horizon, but Jake knew they would be back. Zara had answers, and he was determined to find out why his face had made an alien woman cry. 3 days had passed since they brought Zara aboard the New Horizon. Dr. Ben Carter had set up a special medical bay for her, carefully monitoring her recovery while trying to understand her alien biology. The silver-skinned woman was getting stronger each day, but she still watched Jake with those deep, dark eyes whenever he entered the room. Amy Rodriguez had barely slept during those 3 days. She sat hunched over her translation equipment, feeding every sound Zara made into the computer systems. The universal translator was designed to learn new languages, but Zara's speech patterns were unlike anything in their database. "I think I'm finally getting somewhere," Amy announced as Jake entered the medical bay for his daily visit. Her language uses musical tones to change meaning, kind of like singing and talking at the same time. Zara was sitting up in bed now, looking much healthier than when they found her. Her silver skin had regained its glow, and the constellation-like markings on her arms pulsed with soft light. When she saw Jake, she smiled, though tears still gathered in her eyes. "Hello, Zara," Jake said slowly, hoping the translator would convey his meaning. This time, the device worked. Zara's eyes widened as she heard Jake's words converted into her own language. She responded with a stream of musical sounds that the translator converted back to English. "You speak," the machine said in its flat mechanical voice. "The promised one speaks to Zara." Jake pulled up a chair beside her bed. Promised one? What does that mean? Zara looked confused for a moment, then began speaking again. Amy watched her equipment carefully as the translation came through. You are what my people call the makers, the ones who shaped us in the long ago time. You look exactly as the old stories describe. Ben stopped his medical work to listen. Makers? Like creators? Zara nodded enthusiastically. Yes, creators. My people are called Velani. Our oldest books tell of the makers who gave us life and form. They went away when we were young, but promised to return when we needed them most. Jake felt his stomach tighten. And you think we're these makers? I know you are, Zara said, her voice growing stronger through the translator. Look at me, then look at yourself. We are the same shape, the same form. Only our skin and markings are different. The stories say the makers looked exactly like you. Amy pulled up some scans on her tablet. Captain, I've been analyzing her speech patterns. There are references to religious texts, prophecies, things that sound like they've been passed down for thousands of years. Zara reached out and gently touched Jake's hand. I have been alone on the station for 2 years, waiting. When our star began to die, most of my people fled to other worlds. But the Keeper of Memories must stay, the old laws say. Someone must remain to greet the makers when they return. Keeper of Memories? Ben asked. I hold the history of my people. The old stories, the prophecies, the sacred knowledge. When I saw you, she looked directly at Jake, I knew the time had come. That is why I cried. Joy and fear together. Jake leaned forward. Fear? Why were you afraid? Zara's expression grew sad. Because the prophecies speak of 2 possibilities. Either the makers return to save the Velani in our darkest hour, or they come to witness our final ending. The room fell silent. Jake could hear the quiet hum of the ship's engines and the soft beeping of Ben's medical equipment. Outside the porthole, the dying red star continued its slow death, casting everything in crimson light. Tell us about your people, Jake said gently. What happened to them? Zara's markings dimmed as she spoke. We were once great. Our cities covered whole continents. Our ships traveled between many stars. But then came the great sickness. She paused, touching her chest where her heart would be. It started slowly. Children were born weaker than their parents. Our lifespans grew shorter. The sickness was not like a disease you catch, but something wrong with our very essence. Ben looked up from his medical scanner. Genetic degradation? I do not understand those words, Zara said, but perhaps. Each generation was less than the one before. Our numbers fell. Our strength faded. The wisest among us said we were dying as a people. Amy had been recording everything. How many of your people are left? When I last heard from the evacuation, fleets, perhaps 10,000 scattered across 12 worlds. But that was 2 years ago. The sickness grows worse with each passing season. Jake stood up and walked to the porthole. The alien station hung in space nearby, dark and empty, except for the few sections they had found still working. He thought about Earth, 30 light years away, and how humanity had sent him out here to explore and learn. Now he was faced with something no one had prepared him for. Zara, he said, turning back to her, these prophecies of yours, what exactly do they say about the Maker's return? She closed her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice took on a different quality, as if she was reciting from memory. When the children of the Makers face their final night, when the stars themselves grow cold, and the great sickness claims the last of their strength, then shall the Makers return. They will look upon their children with either mercy or judgment. If mercy, the children shall be renewed and rise again. If judgment, the children shall fade into memory, and their works shall be dust. The translation device fell silent. Jake could feel his crew looking at him, waiting for his response. The weight of Zara's words pressed down on him like the gravity of a massive planet. "And you believe we're here to make that choice?" he asked. Zara opened her eyes and nodded. "The timing cannot be coincidence. You arrived just as my people face extinction. You look exactly as the Makers are described. You found me, the last keeper of memories, waiting in the place where our ancestors first spoke with the Makers long ago." "This station," Lisa said suddenly. "It's a temple, isn't it?" "Yes," Zara replied. "Built on the spot where the first contact between Makers and Vellani took place, according to our histories. I was chosen to wait here because if the Makers ever returned, this is where they would come first." Jake sat back down, his mind racing. Earth needed to know about this. But what would he tell them? That humanity looked like ancient alien gods? That an entire species might be depending on them for survival? "Zara," he said carefully, "can you show us these old stories, these prophecies? We need to understand what we're dealing with." She smiled, the first truly happy expression he'd seen from her. "Yes, the station's memory core holds everything. All our history, all our knowledge. I will show you, and then you will understand why I cried when I saw you." As Zara began to explain how to access the station's data systems, Jake realized that this first contact was going to be far more complicated than anyone on Earth had imagined. They hadn't just discovered aliens. They had apparently discovered aliens who worshipped beings that looked exactly like humans. The implications were staggering, and Jake wasn't sure humanity was ready for them. But ready or not, the Vellani were counting on them, and Zara was looking at him like he held the fate of her entire species in his hands. Maybe, Jake thought with growing unease, he actually did. The alien station's data core was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Zara led them through corridors that seemed to pulse with their own inner light, past chambers filled with crystalline structures that hummed with stored information. Her silver skin glowed brighter here, as if the station itself was giving her energy. "My people built this place to last forever," she explained as they walked. "All our knowledge, all our history, everything we learned in 10,000 years of civilization is stored here." Amy carried her portable translation unit, which had improved dramatically over the past few days. The device could now handle most of Zara's speech, though some concepts still came through unclear. They entered a vast circular chamber where millions of crystal formations covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Each crystal pulsed with soft light, and Jake could hear a faint musical tone coming from them, like a choir of electronic voices. "This is the memory of my people," Zara said with reverence. "Each crystal holds a piece of our story." She approached a section of the wall and placed her hand on a particular crystal. The room filled with light, and suddenly holographic images appeared in the air around them. Jake gasped as he saw what looked like ancient Earth, but the continents were wrong, and two moons hung in the sky. "This is Vellano's, our home world," Zara said. The images showed cities that seemed to grow from the landscape itself, with towers that twisted toward the sky like living trees. Beings that looked almost human walked through the streets, but their skin had the same silver quality as Zara's. "Now, watch," Zara said, touching another crystal. The scene changed to show a much more primitive world. The Vellani in these images were different, more animal-like, walking on four legs and covered in thick fur. They lived in simple caves and showed no signs of intelligence beyond basic survival. "This is how my people were before the Makers came," Zara explained. "We were nothing more than beasts." Another crystal showed the arrival of beings that made Jake's heart skip a beat. They looked exactly like humans, wearing clothing that reminded him of ancient Earth civilizations. The human-like figures walked among the primitive Vellani, and wherever they touched them, the creatures began to change. "The Makers gave us intelligence, taught us to stand upright, showed us how to build and create, Zara continued. They guided us for many generations until we could survive on our own. Ben was studying the holographic images with his medical scanner. Captain, this is incredible. These images show actual genetic modification taking place. Look at the cellular structure changes. The holograms continued to play, showing the gradual transformation of the Valani from animals to intelligent beings. The human-like makers taught them language, mathematics, art, and science. Under their guidance, the Valani built their first cities and developed their own technology. Why did they leave? Jake asked. Zara touched another crystal, and the images shifted to show a great gathering. Thousands of Valani surrounded a small group of the Maker beings. The Makers appeared to be saying goodbye, gesturing toward the stars. The old texts say the Makers told us they had others to guide, other children to nurture among the stars. But they promised to return when we needed them most, when our survival was threatened. Amy was frantically taking notes. And they left. These prophecies about their return? Yes, Zara said, activating another crystal. The hologram showed Vellani priests writing on stone tablets while one of the Makers spoke to them. The prophecy of the final choice. Jake watched as the ancient scene played out. The Maker figure pointed to the sky, then to the Vellani gathered around him. Even without understanding the ancient language, Jake could see that something important was being communicated. What exactly does the prophecy say will happen when the Makers return? He asked. Zara's expression grew solemn. That they will judge whether their children have grown worthy of salvation, or if we have failed and must pass into darkness. Lisa had been examining the technology around them. Zara, you said your people are dying from some kind of sickness. Can you show us what that looks like? Zara hesitated, then moved to a different section of crystals. These glowed with a darker light, and the images they projected were disturbing. Jake saw Vellani, who looked weak and pale, their silver skin losing its luster. Children were being born with deformities, and many died young. The great sickness began about 300 of our years ago, Zara explained. At first, we thought it was just bad luck. A few weak children, some early deaths, but it grew worse. The holograms showed hospitals full of sick Vellani scientists, working desperately to find a cure, and gradually emptying cities as the population declined. Ben was studying the medical data that appeared alongside the images. This isn't a disease, he said slowly. This is systematic genetic breakdown. Their DNA is literally falling apart. Can you be more specific? Jake asked. Look at these cellular scans. Ben pointed to the holographic displays. Every generation, their genetic code becomes more unstable. It's like their entire species is aging at a cellular level. Zara nodded sadly. Our wisest healers came to the same conclusion. We are dying not from any outside force, but from something wrong within. U.S. As if our very life essence is unwinding. Amy looked up from her notes. But why? What would cause something like that? The healers believe it began when we left our home world, Zara said. Vellanos had special properties, certain radiations from our star that may have been necessary for our health. When we spread to other worlds, we lost that protection. Jake studied the data Ben was collecting. Is there a cure? We tried everything, Zara replied. Medicines, treatments, even returning some of our people to Vellanos. Nothing worked. The sickness is in our blood now, passed from parent to child. Each generation is weaker than the last. Ben looked up from his scanner with an expression Jake had never seen before. Captain, I'm detecting something else. Zara's genetic structure, it's remarkably similar to human DNA. Not identical, but like a variation on the same basic pattern. What does that mean? Jake asked. I'm not sure yet, but if the ancient stories are true, If humans really did modify the Valani genetically thousands of years ago, then we might be the key to fixing. What's wrong with them? Zara stared at Ben with wide eyes. You believe you can heal the great sickness? I don't know, Ben said honestly. But human genetic material might be able to stabilize the degradation your people are experiencing. It would be incredibly dangerous to attempt, and I'd need to do extensive research. Jake felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him again. An entire alien species was dying, and they believed humans were their creators and saviors. Now Ben was suggesting that belief might actually be true. Zara, he said carefully, how many of your people are still alive out there? The last message I received spoke of 12 colony worlds, with perhaps 8,000 survivors total. But that was 2 years ago. The number is surely smaller now. Jake thought about Earth, about the governments and scientists who would want to study this situation. Carefully, run tests for years, make sure humanity wasn't putting itself at risk. But 8,000 aliens were dying while Earth debated. Can you contact these colony worlds? He asked. Zara's markings brightened with hope. Yes, the station's communication array can reach them. But they will not believe me if I simply tell them the makers have returned. They will need proof. What kind of proof? They will need to see you, to hear you speak, to know that the prophecy is fulfilled. And most importantly, they will need to see that you have the power to heal the great sickness. Jake looked at his crew. Ben was already deep in thought about the medical possibilities. Amy was calculating communication delays to distant star systems. Lisa was studying the alien technology around them. How long do your people have? Jake asked. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. The healers estimated 2 years before the last of us die. But that estimate was made 3 years ago. Jake closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining this to Earth Command. An alien species that worshipped humans as gods was dying, and they wanted humanity to save them based on prophecies and genetic experiments from thousands of years ago. But when he opened his eyes and saw Zara looking at him with desperate hope, Jake knew that Earth's reaction didn't matter. These people were dying, and if there was even a chance that humans could help them, he had to try. The question was whether he had the right to make that choice for all of humanity. The response from Earth came 3 days after Jake sent his full report about the Valani situation. The delay was expected given the vast distance, but the content of the message made Jake's stomach sink as he read it aloud to his crew. Mission: Commander Morrison, you are ordered to maintain safe distance from alien subjects and avoid any genetic experimentation or medical intervention. The discovery of beings claiming human ancestry requires extensive study by our xenobiology teams. Return to Earth immediately with the alien subject for proper evaluation. Amy shook her head in disgust. They want us to bring Zara back like some kind of specimen. They're scared, Lisa said, though she didn't sound happy about it. Can you blame them? An entire alien species that thinks we're their gods? That's terrifying from a political standpoint. Ben looked up from his research station. While Earth debates, I've been working with Zara's medical data. The genetic degradation is accelerating. If my calculations are correct, the Valani colonies have maybe 6 months before complete population collapse. Jake stared out at the alien station, where Zara was currently working to establish contact with her scattered people. Over the past week, she had become more than just a rescued alien to him. She was intelligent, kind, and deeply committed to saving her species. The idea of dragging her back to Earth to be studied while her people died felt wrong on every level. Captain, Amy said quietly, I've been monitoring Earth communications. There's already massive debate about our discovery. Some groups are calling it the greatest scientific find in history. Others are claiming it's all fake or some kind of trap. And the governments? Jake asked. They're arguing about jurisdiction, about who gets to make first contact policies, about whether we should even be out here. It could take years for them to decide what to do. Ben slammed his hand down on his workstation. Years? These people don't have years. They might not even have months. Jake had been dreading this moment, but he knew it was coming. Earth wanted caution and study. The Velani needed action now. As the mission commander, he could follow orders and let an entire species die while politicians and scientists debated. Or he could make a choice that would change everything. Ben, he said slowly, how confident are you that human genetic material could help stabilize the Velani condition? Based on what I've learned from Zara and the station's medical records, I'd say there's a 70% chance of success. The risks to humans would be minimal, just donating some genetic samples. The risks to the Velani would be higher, but they're dying anyway. Jake nodded and activated the ship's communication system. Zara, please come to the bridge. She arrived. A few minutes later, her silver skin glowing with anticipation. Have you heard from your people about helping mine? Jake took a deep breath. Zara, my people want to study the situation more before taking any action. They want me to bring you back to Earth for examination. The light in Zara's markings dimmed, and tears began forming in her dark eyes. How long would this studying take? Probably years? Then my people will all be dead, she said simply. The Makers have returned only to watch us die. The pain in her voice cut through Jake like a blade. He had seen her hope growing over the past week as Ben made progress with his research. Now he was watching that hope die. Not necessarily, Jake said. I'm prepared to go against my orders and help your people now, but I need to know exactly what that would involve. Zara's eyes widened with surprise. You would defy your own leaders? If it means saving your species, yes. Ben leaned forward. Here's what I think we can do. Using samples of human DNA, I can create a genetic treatment that should stabilize the Velani cellular degradation. The process would need to be administered to volunteers, first to test its safety. I volunteer, Zara said immediately. It could kill you, Ben warned. I am already dying, she replied. We all are. At least this way, there is hope. Jake looked at his crew. Amy was nodding her agreement. Lisa looked worried, but determined. Ben was already pulling up his research on the treatment process. What would we need to do? Jake asked. First, I'd need genetic samples from human volunteers. The more diverse, the better. Then I can synthesize a treatment using the station's medical facilities. If it works on Zara, we can contact the Velani colonies and offer it to them. Jake stood up and faced his crew. You all understand what this means. We'll be directly disobeying orders from Earth. We could face court-martial when we return, assuming we're allowed to return at all. Amy was the first to speak. Captain, I've been listening to Zara's people for days now. And messages from their colonies are getting more desperate. Children are dying. Entire settlements are going dark. How can we stand by and do nothing? Lisa nodded slowly. My engineering oath says I'm supposed to use my knowledge to benefit humanity. But what's the point of being human if we won't help others when we can? Ben looked directly at Jake. I became a doctor to save lives. I don't care what species those lives are. Jake felt a surge of pride in his crew. They were risking everything for people they had just met, for a species they barely understood. It was exactly the kind of courage and compassion that made humanity worth defending. All right, he said. Ben, you have volunteers for your genetic samples. How long will you need to prepare the treatment? Give me 48 hours to synthesize something using the station's equipment. I'll need Zara's help to understand their medical systems. Zara's markings blazed with renewed hope. The station has everything you need. My people built it to be a center of healing, as well as memory. Jake activated the ship's recording system. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the exploration vessel New Horizon. I am officially logging my decision to provide medical assistance to the Velani species against direct orders from Earth Command. I take full responsibility for this action and any consequences that may result. He turned to Zara. While Ben prepares the treatment, I want you to contact your colonies. Tell them the makers have returned and that we're going to try to save them. Tears were streaming down Zara's silver cheeks again, but this time they were tears of joy. They will not believe it at first. The colonies have lost much hope. Then we'll have to prove it to them, Jake said. Amy, I want you to prepare a message for broadcast to all Velani settlements. Tell them who we are and what we're offering. Amy nodded. What should I say about Earth's position? Jake considered this carefully. Tell them the truth, that some humans want to help them, and others are afraid, that we're here as individuals, not as representatives of all humanity. Zara approached Jake and took his hands in hers. When I first saw you, I cried because I did not know if you had come to save us or to witness our end. Now I know. We don't know if this will work, Jake warned her. The treatment is experimental and dangerous. But you are trying, Zara said. That is all the prophecy promised. That when our darkest hour came, the makers would return and choose mercy over judgment. You have chosen mercy. As his crew dispersed to their tasks, Jake remained on the bridge, staring out at the dying red star. In 48 hours, they would either begin saving an entire species or watch the first volunteer die from an experimental treatment. Either way, there would be no going back. Earth would be furious when they learned what he had done. There would be investigations, trials, probably the end of his career, and possibly his freedom. But when Jake looked at the alien station, where Zara was already beginning to contact her scattered people with news of hope, he knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes being human meant more than just surviving. Sometimes it meant having the courage to risk everything for others, even if those others had silver skin and worshipped you as a god. The treatment chamber in the alien station glowed with soft blue light as Dr. Ben Carter made his final preparations. 47 hours had passed since Jake made his decision to help the Velani, and now everything came down to this moment. Zara lay on the organic-looking medical bed, her silver skin pale, but her markings still pulsing with determined light. Are you sure about this? Ben asked her one final time. Once I inject the synthesized treatment, there's no going back. Zara smiled at him, then looked toward Jake, who stood nearby with Amy and Lisa. I have been waiting my entire life for this moment. My people chose me to be the keeper of memories because they trusted me to make the right choices for our species. This is the right choice. Ben nodded and activated the alien medical device he had spent 2 days learning to operate. The synthesized treatment flowed through tubes that seemed to be grown rather than manufactured, carrying human genetic material modified to work with Velani biology. How will we know if it's working? Amy asked quietly. Her cellular degradation should slow down within hours, Ben replied, watching the readings on both human and alien medical equipment. If it works, the genetic breakdown will stop and begin to reverse. Jake watched Zara's face as the treatment entered her system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her markings began to glow brighter, pulsing in patterns they had never seen before. Her silver skin took on a more vibrant color, and her breathing became deeper and steadier. I feel different, she said, wonder in her voice.